so I change the signs here. Okay, now for division, since division is a special case where you can't have your denominator as 0 if your numerator is greater than 0. So I'm going to write code. Okay, so now I fixed my signs. Now, for division, it's a special case where the denominator can't be 0 if the numerator is greater than 1. So I'm going to write some code to test for that. So, and the condition I want to test for is if my number 1, which will be in the numerator, is greater than 0, which I will do using an if statement, which is a statement that tests the condition, which tests the condition. If this meets the condition, it will perform a task. If not, then it does another thing. So what I set for the condition, if the numerator is greater than 0 and the denominator is 0, then I write an else statement so that it performs another task if the condition's not met over here. So I know that I want this to be performed if, if my denominator is not equal to 0. So here I'm going to write some code to display a message box. And show, which will display the message box. And my first parameter is to write some text that will be displayed. So and then the second parameter is the title of the message box. I will call it warning. And then the third parameter is a message box button, which is a button that will allow, the user to click. So I'm just going to write OK, because I want them to keep continuing after they see the message. And then the final one is an optional parameter, and it's a message box icon. And the icon I want to display is a warning icon. Okay, so now my if statement, what the message is if my number is, the numerator is greater than 0 and my denominator is equal to 0, then I display this message. Or else it performs a division arithmetic. Now I'm going to finish writing the code for the calculate button, click subfunction. First I will declare 3 variables. So my first one is number 1. And all 3 variables are going to be declared as integers. Okay, so the purpose of the variable title number 1 and variable called number 2 is that I'm going to store the value that I get from the text box, the first one in number 1, and the value that I get from the second text box then to number 2. And then answer is the variable that I'm going to use to display the value in, and so answer will hold the variable that will be displayed in the result label. Okay, so now I'm going to write several if statements, if-else statements that will check to see which radio button is clicked, and that will determine what operation will be performed. So I start out with if, and then I write the name of the radio button. So since addition is the first arithmetic operation, I choose add radio button. Okay, so I wrote add radio button, then period, and this period allows me to access the various properties of the radio button. So the property I want to look for is checked, which sees if the radio button was checked. So if that condition is true, then what I want to do is, actually before I write the if statements, I won't jump too ahead. I have to retrieve the information from the text boxes. So what I'm going to do is do a try parse, which allows me to convert from a string to an integer. So what I want to do is reference the text box. So okay, I forgot to add an ID to my text box, so I'm going to do this really quick. So I go to properties, and then I go to the name property, and I'm going to give this num1 txt, and then I do the same thing for the second text box. So it's num2 txt. Okay, so alright, so now I can go back to my code. Now I can reference the name of the text box, so num.txt, and then I want to access its text property to get the text value that was entered. So I got that. Now, comma, and then I enter the second parameter, which is the, so I entered the second parameter, which is the integer variable that I declared called number1. And what the try parse method will do is that it will convert the string, the text value from the text box, and it will store it into number1. So I will do the same thing for the second text box. Okay. All right, now I have my two integer variables with a value stored in. Now I can write my code to check for the radio buttons. Okay, so I start with this so for the add radio button, if it's checked, then I want to return the value of the addition function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write answer, since I am going to store the answer of the addition function into this answer variable. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to write down the addition function in parentheses, and this is where these two integer variables come into play. So since the integer number1 and number2 have the values from the form, I'm going to pass them through. So I'm going to pass number 1 first. Number 1. The number 2. And then I'm going to write an else if statement, which will, if that condition is not true, then it checks to see if another radio button was checked. So the next one is subtraction. Sub. Then I can just copy and paste and change the name of the function accordingly. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing for multiplication. And then since if it's none of those, then it's obviously going to be division, so no need to declare another else if. So okay, now I have all my if, else if, and else statements declared. So now, if I get my answer depending on which operation was selected, so now I can finally write my answer to the label. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference the name of my label, result lbl.text, because I want to write to the text property. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to convert the answer, which is an integer, to strings. So I write the name of the variable answer, and then I access the toString method, which allows a conversion from integer to a text value, or otherwise known as string. Okay, so I save that. Then I go back to my form design, and I click Start to test out my program. Okay, so now the build is starting, and I'm just waiting for the program to compile my application. Okay, now here's my application. I'm going to put 2 and 1 as my test numbers. So now it calculates. So this is correct. Now I will do subtraction. That's 1. Multiplication. That's true. Then division. That's true. Now I'm going to test it out. And it performs all the operations correctly. So let's test it out again. Multiplication, subtraction, and addition. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. It was a pleasure doing this tutorial. I hope you learned a lot about Visual Basic. And yeah, thank you so much for viewing. Goodbye.